Joseph says, and their guilt remained, and they knew it. That's why they're having this conversation with Joseph to begin with after their father dies, because they're scared. And they even speak to him beforehand, right? When, well, you'll just have to read the account for yourself. You'll recall. But they're burdened with this guilt. They know that they've wronged their brother. But we must hold both realities together because Scripture does. Man's evil intent doesn't cancel out God's purpose and intent. And God's good intent and purposes don't excuse man's evil. Both are true in Scripture. And again, that pattern reaches its highest point in the sacrifice of God's Son. Think again about Peter's words we read in Acts chapter 2 this morning, verse 23. Right? He says, as Peter is preaching, this man, Jesus, was delivered over by the predetermined plan and foreknowledge of God, you nailed to a cross by the hands of godless men and put him to death. Both sides there. Jesus was delivered up, how? By what? The predetermined plan and foreknowledge of God. Cross wasn't an accident. It was the plan all along. Revelation 13:8 says Jesus is the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. God was not scrambling to react to Adam and Eve's rebellion. Of course not. That's not the God we serve. The death of Jesus was within the determined purpose and foreknowledge of God. But back to Peter, notice the rest of the verse at verse 23. God's predetermined plan and foreknowledge did not make them innocent. You nailed to a cross by the hands of who? Godless men, and put them to death. They're still called godless. Yes, they were fulfilling God's predetermined plan. He knew exactly what was going to happen. The cross was always God's purpose, and it will forever remain man's greatest crime. But we are culpable, you see. You know, Jesus said the same thing concerning Judas in Luke 22. Indeed, the Son of Man is going as it has been determined, but woe to that man by whom he is betrayed. You see there again in one verse, both realities held together. It has been determined. It has been determined. There's the purpose of God. But woe to that man. There's the human guilt. Yes, there was God's purpose and determination and foreknowledge. Judas was still accountable. The godless men who crucified the Lord were still accountable. That's why Jesus prayed for their forgiveness as he was dying. So we'll talk more about this a little later. That God's foreknowledge doesn't excuse man's sin. So you have all these examples: Assyria, Joseph's brothers, Judas, the rulers who crucified Jesus. God's purpose stands over all of them. There's another layer to this. That's why I have Caiaphas on the screen. Because here's a case where someone speaks more than he understands. Caiaphas, being the high priest, was instrumental in the crucifixion of Jesus and condemning him, in leading that mock trial and blaspheming the Son of God. But John says something interesting here in John 11, verse 49. It says, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all, nor do you take into account that it is expedient for you that one man may die for the people, and not the whole nation not perish. Now look at John's commentary. He did not say this on his own initiative, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but in order that he might also gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. Now, Caiaphas, we can safely say, is not thinking about God's purpose. Yet he was nevertheless inspired to reveal what God's plan was, that Jesus would in fact die for the nation. But he is thinking politically, and his intention, you look at the context of John 11, is to preserve his status and those like him. Right? He thinks that if Jesus goes on, that eventually Rome is just going to come and take away any authority